The Pacers have an ugly loss before getting their first win of the season over the weekend. What was different in the games that allowed the Pacers to get the win that they can build off of? What's going really well for this team, like Haliburton Mathurin looking amazing, and what needs to be better for the Pacers going forward this season? We'll get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News and SI. And today, wow, do we have a lot to get to on the Pacers front. Pacers lose Friday night. Defense looks embarrassing. Spurs shoot 1,000,000%. Sky's falling 0-2. Pistons coming in the next day. And then the Pacers correct a lot of their problems, have some role players step up, get huge games from their young guard stars, and get their first win. So some encouraging signs this weekend. Pacers still 1-2, but some stuff to build on. So what I want to talk about today is what changed that went well for the Pacers, what is going really well with the two young guards in Haliburton and Mathurin, and of course, what needs to be better as this team continues to push on, because they have a very grueling road trip coming up this week. So tons and tons to get to today. If I sound a little different on the old audio, I'm on the travel setup right now. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I have my laptop set up on a treadmill, and I'm in front of closets at family house. So a little different, but we'll make it work, and we'll get going on the Pacers, because it was a super fun weekend despite the loss. The Pacers almost came back from down a ton to beat San Antonio. I believe the Spurs' biggest lead was 15 or 16. They get 21. It wasn't even close in that third quarter. So the Pacers had a chance to tie that one up late. They figured out a lot of their problems late in that game, but it was way too late. And it took a 49-point fourth quarter for that to even be close. But then they beat the Pistons Saturday night and correct a ton of their issues in that game, or at least for a night corrected a ton of their issues. So what went well for the Pacers that game that wasn't going well earlier? Well, first and foremost, what changed? The starters changed, right? That was the big thing that really helped the Pacers, to me, is they kind of balanced out their rotations a little bit. And in covering these early games, a lot of figuring out what works and will be important this season is going to be crucial, right? So Rick Carlisle heads into the the third game of the season against the Pistons, and already changes the starting five. He said Friday night that he's not a big lineup changes guy, but with this team, with so many new guys, with the situation they're in with rebuilding, it made more sense for him to kind of change his opinion on lineup changes and actually make one for this team, and he did it. So Aaron Nesmith came into the starting five for Terry Taylor. He ends up starting at the 3-4-ish, mostly the 3 for him. And then Chris Duarte goes out for Isaiah Jackson, who ends up moving in at the 4 spot. I guess you could say they went in for other guys, but either way, the starting five became Haliburton, Hield, Nesmith, Jackson, and Smith. And so what that did is a few things. One is it moved Jalen Smith back to the 4, where he played for all of training camp, had gotten comfortable playing next to another big, and given that he's a little skinnier for a center, kind of puts him on matchups that he can handle just as well, while adding some more defense to Jackson, who's a better defender than Terry Taylor right now. And then Nesmith, who him and Duarte are capable defenders on the wing, but Nesmith has a different kind of defense, and he's up for defending, the best players on the other team every night. Duarte is too, but I just had a one-on-one with Nesmith, and that's something that Carlisle talked about Nesmith, is that he wants to defend the other team's best player every game. So not only did it help the starting five, but it also balanced the rotation and putting Duarte in better situations with the second unit. It put Terry Taylor in more natural spots with the second unit, right? In general, everyone was in a better spot to succeed. The whole big man rotation with Goga Bitadze coming in also just flowed a lot better. So, of course, a starting lineup change is going to help the starting lineup. That's why it was made in the first place. But it also balanced out the roles of every other player, right? It didn't take away from what Haliburton and Mathurin need with their touches to be successful. It didn't take away from what TJ McConnell needs to drive the second unit. And all the role players could still do their job and fit in well with the guys around them. So, in general, a pretty successful switch. That lineup itself, the actual starting five from that game, was still a -2. But the starting fives in the first two games were much worse, much worse, like -8, -9 in their time against the Wizards and the Spurs. So that lineup itself was better, but I think the big ripple effect was the entire rotation was balanced out and it made a lot of sense. The second thing that changed for the Pacers from their Spurs and Wizards losses to the Pistons win is the success of two key role players, and they're both bigs, Jalen Smith and Goga Bitadze. We'll start with Smith because I alluded to this earlier. He moved to the 4, and it just kind of clicked for him, right? Rick Carlisle said he came in with a different disposition and posture in this game. Everything he did just looked more crisp. Cutting, good. Defense, fantastic. 3 blocks. On the glass, nose for the ball, was ready for it. 15 boards, 3 of them on the offensive side of the ball. Was hitting shots, right? Buried a 3, finished with 19 points. And so many dunks, right? He found himself around the basket and open all the time. And it didn't come at the sacrifice of any defense, right? I don't think he would have done too well going against kind of beefier centers in Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, who both had tough nights. Stewart especially was 2 for 10, but he can do a little bit better guarding Bogdanovich or Sadiq Bey, who both shot 5 of 16 in this game. Normally I think Smith could do better on 5s than 4s, but this matchup specifically, where the centers are beefier, it makes more sense to have him on the 4s, and he did very, very well in this game. Showed a lot of why the Pacers were so happy to be able to get him back this offseason, why Rick Carlisle likes him so much. So his first 2 games were really rough, especially the Spurs game on Friday. Like, I don't want to be all rosy about the Saturday night game on this podcast and forget about Friday, because the Pacers defense was atrocious that game, and Smith, he got hurt, so he didn't play the whole game, but in the third quarter, he got hurt, and he only played 6:47 in that game, right? He did not deserve more playing time. He was not playing well in that game. It was not a good performance from him. He bounced back in a huge way. 2 points, 2 rebounds Friday night, 19 and 15 the very next day. So that one ascension went a long way in helping the Pacers play a better game, and getting Smith, I think, in the right role was really helpful as well, because he was kind of poor in these other games. The other guy was Goga Bitadze, who had been pretty good in the first 2 games. I think he was the best Pacers big through 2 games. Isaiah Jackson had a really good second half against the Spurs, so I would accept anyone saying he had the best first 2-game run for the bigs. But Goga was good consistently throughout the first 2 games. But he wasn't playing as much or putting as much force on the game. Friday against the Spurs, he was 4 for 7, 8 points, 1 rebound in that game. Against the Pistons, maybe the best game of his career, maybe second best. If you remember, he had that game in Houston last year where he had 23 points and didn't miss a shot. But Goga finished with 14 points, 15 boards, did not miss a 2-point shot, 4 assists, 8 offensive boards for Goga Bitadze, 8 offensive boards. He kept possessions alive. His screens were crisp. He looked awesome. He's hyping up the crowd, getting his teammates into it. And that's why I called it the best game of his career. I think statistically alone, he had a game in LA against the Clippers last year that was really good, and a game in Houston that was really good. And this game rivals those on the statistical front. But also in this game against Detroit, Goga had the best dunk of his career, hyped up the crowd. When the Pacers were kind of slipping a little in the second half, got into it with Isaiah Livers. It was a double tech, but it really juiced him and the team up. Those little things that go beyond what his stats say were key in this game, and he looked much better than he did even in the first 2 games where he already played good. So those 2 front court guys stepping up, Isaiah Jackson continuing his form from the second half of the second game, right? He started and his shot wasn't falling, but 5 blocks. The Pacers had 15 as a team, 5 boards, 8 points for Jackson. The front court stepping up was the second thing that I think changed it a lot that really helped the Pacers. And the third one, the defense. Finally, the defense stabilized a bit. The Spurs are 2-1 and maybe are a little better than everybody thought. But going into that game, I said I think they're going to be the worst team in the league. They then proceeded to score more than 30 points in every quarter of that game. They beat the Sixers the very next night. So the Spurs, as of this second, 3 games into the season, are perhaps a little better than I thought. Who knows how much that will last. But either way, their offense was way too good compared to what their talent suggests they should be. The Pacers could not guard a potted plant Friday night. It was embarrassing how bad their defense was. Spurs had 3 20-point scores. One was Josh Richardson, who's not normally an offensive threat. They hit 55% from deep. They had basically no turnovers until the fourth quarter. They had 7 turnovers in the first 3 quarters. Pacers defense put no force on the Spurs. And then they completely turned it around against the Pistons. Some of it was the rotation changes, getting Smith on more natural matchups, Jackson in better positions, Goga on the floor more, Nesmith and Duarte guarding more naturally, right? It all kind of clicked with the rotation change, but they also just had more force. They forced more turnovers, right? The Pistons end up with 13, but it was over the course of the whole game because the force was constant. They were more in guys' faces. The Pistons only shot 39% from the field. They still shot well from three. That's a problem we'll talk about in the third segment. But in general, the Pacers were more bothersome in this game in a way that was very successful for them. And given the way the Pacers want to play, forcing enough misses that the Pacers themselves can get 39 defensive rebounds and be this transition, early offense, whatever team that they've talked about wanting to be for so long, it really adds up when their defense starts getting better on how much it can help them win games. So I think their defense looked better against the Pistons in a way that finally helped them win. Now, a couple other things that helped. The Spurs hit a zillion open threes, and they were open. It's not a criticism of the Spurs to say they made them, but they made them at a rate above what is normally expected. The Pistons hit them at a normal rate, and that went a long way. Another tweak that I think is really, really noteworthy and worth watching going forward is the Pacers had their best defensive game of the season, and Buddy Hield only played 15 minutes, 15 and a half to be exact, against the Pistons. He finished ninth, on the Pacers in minutes that night. There will be matchups where he is more needed and his offense is more needed. In this game, they needed defense, and they opted to go with Mathurin more, with McConnell more, with Nembhard a little bit, and go a little bigger with Duarte Nesmith at 2-3 instead of Buddy Hield. I thought that was really noteworthy because his defense is notoriously poor despite being such a talented offensive player. I still think he'll end up starting and playing more than that most of the time, but in defense-needed situations, I don't know if he'll be there that as often. Something Rick Carlisle always talks about is force, playing with force on defense. That was certainly there in this game. 15 blocks. I don't remember the last time they had that many in a game. Someone brought it up on one of the broadcasts. It was several years ago. I mean, the front court players did fantastic on both ends of the court. So the Pacers really found a way to get it going on defense. This is all the stuff they need to try to repeat, right? Get their front court rolling, get the defense continued to have force the entire game with the right rotation, and of course, keep finding that right rotation. This was much better than the first two games for the Pacers. Perhaps a minor tweak here and there, but in general, they played 11 guys. If that 11 guys works, keep using it. Now, they have tougher opponents coming up, so it might be harder to evaluate, but they found stuff that works, and I think that's key for a team that was on the cusp of starting 0-3. They still had a horrible first quarter against the Pistons. It looked like it was going to happen, but it didn't. Now, Pacers 1-2. Talked about what change stuff they can build on, but there's some key constants for this franchise through 3 games that are just W-O-W. Wow. Bennedict Mathurin and Tyrese Haliburton look unbelievable. I probably should have led with them because they are the story of the weekend, but getting the win, showing growth, I really wanted to talk about, but I got to talk about the constants, the 2 guys that have showed up every single game for this Pacers team coming up. Before we do that, though, I want to talk to you guys about PrizePicks. You can take Luka Doncic to score more than 26 points, LeBron to have more than 7 rebounds. Whatever you think is going to happen on an NBA night, PrizePicks has the thing for you to do. Their format is super fun and super easy to understand. You pick a player and the projections PrizePicks give you for them that night on a variety of stats. You can just pick one stat. You can pick more than one for a guy, whatever. And you pick. Will it be more or less? It's super simple and it's super fun because you're going against PrizePicks, not a bunch of different people. It's a great way to play daily fantasy that is easy on a great format and more in your control. You can pick 2 to 5 players if they'll score more or less than their projections, and you can win up to 10 times your money in any entry, no competing against other people. And they offer projections in any sport you watch, NBA, NFL, MLB, and tons more. You can make your entries in a minute or less. It's that easy, and it's safe, and of course, fast withdrawals. It's operational in 30 states as well as Canada. So go download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant match deposit. You put in $100, they give you $100. You put in 50, you get 50, etc. If you use the promo code Locked On. So don't forget, enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For the second listen, one of my favorite surprise teams to start the season, the Portland Trail Blazers. 3-0. Damian Lillard looks awesome. Oh, the NBA is great when Dame's killing it. Listen to Mike Richmond over at Locked On Blazers talking about that 3-0 start. I can't wait to listen to his show tomorrow on my car ride back from where I am now. Because again, if you can see me on YouTube, I am not in my normal setup. Either way, we continue on talking about probably the biggest story for the Pacers over this weekend, over the season. Again, I wanted to talk about the win and the growth from the team, but these two guys look amazing. And they're 22 and 20 years old. Tyrese Haliburton, it looks unbelievable. Bennedict Mathurin is one of the best rookies I've seen for the Pacers ever. And I've gone back and watched film of some of the legends of the team in their rookie seasons. There's a reason Bennedict Mathurin has the most points by any Pacer rookie through 3 games ever. Thank you. Shout out to Nat Newell from the Indy Star for getting that one out there to know 72 points through 3 games. 72 points for a rookie through 3 games. Remember how good Duarte's start was last year? He did not get to 72 points through 3 games. Mathurin looks fantastic. It's only 3 games, but the Pacers have to feel so confident about the guy they got at 6 between his preseason, between his summer league, between his first 3 games. That's where the 3 came from. He just has so much on offense, and without being an atrocious rookie level defender, those warts will come. I do not want to say that he's going to play like this all season. Every rookie has defensive woes at some point. Every rookie hits a rookie wall. Mathurin will at some point have a game where his shot's not falling. But so far, holy moly, does he look good. The shot's been there, right? He's been hitting the threes against Detroit. He hit 5 of them. On the season, he's 11 for 21. And they're all timely, impressive. He knows when in the flow of the offense, it's time for him not to be a masterful rim attacker and instead be a really good shooter. The ones against Detroit were all timely to either steady the Pacers, to stop a Pistons run, to get the crowd into it, which of course is going to make them look more impressive, but it felt like he hit way more than 5 threes in that game because they were all important. I think that always, when guys hit important shots, it feels like they're having better games than they are. But that said, because he hit 5 threes, he didn't have to hit that many shots to get to his 27 points that night. If he hit a quiet 27, it was unbelievable. He took 18 shots, had 27 points. And it felt like it was a quiet night because the bigs were balling. Tyrese Haliburton had another amazing game. So it's like all these other dudes are stealing the spotlight. Whereas Bennedict Mathurin led the team in scoring and shot attempts. He just looks fantastic on offense. I'm running out of superlatives to say, which is terrible because I have 79 more games to have to do them. But he's just got a beastly offensive game already. His reads coming around screens have been my favorite skill from him so far, which happens to be the thing that he talked about after his big game in the preseason against the Knicks when he had 27 points. But, when I asked him what changed between playing the Knicks the first time and the second time, he talked about how he would read the defense coming around screens. And so to see it in NBA games, now they're not exhibitions, where he comes around the screen off ball and catches, and he already can tell what he needs to do to attack a coverage, go right at a guy, shoot, find the right space in the middle. He's doing a great job in that little in-between game. And his finishes at the cup are fearless. That shot has been falling. He goes right at anybody, including 7'3" Kristaps Porzingis. He just looks like a stud. It's going to be hard to come up with adjectives to talk about Mathurin throughout the season. I'm going to be repeating a bunch of them. But the early returns look unbelievable. He looks absolutely fantastic for the Pacers, and I can't wait to see what he can do going forward. He's second on the team in scoring. He's second on the team in minutes. He's shooting well from all over the floor. He looks like a stud through 3 games for the Pacers, and yet, he's been outshined in the backcourt by Tyrese Haliburton. Mathurin, maybe you think he's been the best Pacer on offense. I accept that. He's been the leading scorer. That seems like a fine argument to me. Halliburton's been better to me. He's been doing it all. Haliburton is 1 assist away. He's 29 in 3 games. He's 1 assist away from currently averaging 25 and 10. 25 points and 10 assists per game. That is insane stats. Haliburton looks ridiculous. He's shooting 50%. He's hit 42% of his threes. He's finding his teammates. He's grabbing rebounds, pushing in transition, not turning it over as much as last year, getting steals. His structure of he is the structure on offense. A lot of times he's in the game. He just gets everybody going. He's getting to the line. That is the big thing that I think has leveled him up, right? The aggression is there. I wrote a whole story about this. In the first game of the season, we had 20 whatever. I can't even remember. All these 20-something point games from him and Mathurin have blended together. in the numbers department. But Haliburton in the first game talked about, how this aggression he wanted to add in the offseason. People had to talk to him about it. He had to do this mentality shift. His teammates noticed it. They think he's going to be awesome. And he's carried that through the games. And obviously that means better shot attempt to assist ratio, right? Shooting 17 times a game. But he's also getting to the line more, where he's magnificent, 85% from the line for his career. He's taking over 6 a game right now for the Pacers. So not only is he shooting more from 2-point range, 5 more per game than last year, and a tiny bit more from 3, he's getting to the line more. All these things have added to his offensive package because I think this is key. Sometimes in development, a problem that a team can have is they focus so much on adding a new skill to a player that they take away what makes him good already. In this case, Haliburton is still 9.6 assists per game for the Pacers last year, 9.7 this year. He is still that guy. He's still the brilliant setup man who can get his teammates the ball in the right spots, run stuff in the flow of the offense, be a threat in the pick and roll, but he's added the scoring aggression. It's really hard to do that, finding the balance of adding to your game without taking away your really good skill. And here's Tyrese Haliburton doing exactly that. That's what made Victor Oladipo's ascent so crazy in 2017-18, right? He added this 3-point shot and a tiny bit of creation and a bunch of defense without taking away his freakish athleticism and things like that. Haliburton has done a similar growth this year to me. I'm going to run out of superlatives and adjectives. He just looks unstoppable getting to his spots outside of when he does this little weird hook shot from 5 feet away from the rim on the right side. Any lineup he's with, he's clicking. Any big he's running pick and roll with, it's clicking. Mathurin and Haliburton just look, they're close to 50 points per game combined right now. I don't think they're going to last that number through the whole season. That seems incredulous for 2 young players. And yet, the signs of slowing them down don't appear to be there. They're taking it at everybody. Switches, no problem. Haliburton's rising up and shooting. Mathurin's taking it at everybody. Haliburton's getting to his spot from wherever it is in the floor, hitting mid-range shots. They could get close to 45 points per game combined this season. And that's special because this is their first year together. I can't wait to track their minutes together. I'm not going to do that through 3 games. That's a little premature for that exercise. But those 2 guys have been the constants for the Pacers that will give fans optimism. Because even when in these games, the Pacers have been down a bunch, right? They've been down double figures in the fourth quarter of both of their losses. And in both of those games, they had a 3-point attempt to tie the game with under a minute to go. Haliburton missed it against the Wizards. Mathurin missed it against the Spurs. But they got to that point because those 2 guys are so potent on offense that at any moment, the Pacers can score a rush of points in a matter of seconds because those 2 guys are so threatening. The defense hasn't been there, but those 2 guys can overcome that. And so the Pacers will be in a lot of games that they have no business in being in because of those guys. If the defense can improve, they've got the core to be a good team in the future. I love watching them so far, and I can't wait to see how they grow together. And I can't wait to see how many times I Google things like brilliant synonyms and then say a word you've never heard of on this podcast because I have to use different words. I can't just use the same things over and over, but those guys are going to make me do it. That's how impressive their start to the season has been. And it's going to be fascinating to see them on this upcoming road trip with more difficult opponents and traveling together for the first time. Quite frankly, another culture shock thing for a young rookie like Mathurin, his first NBA road trip. But they've been so good, and I can't wait to see how they evolve as the season progresses. Let's talk about stuff that needs to improve for the Pacers because as fun as Saturday night was for this team and fans were really into it, as good as Haliburton and Mathurin have been, they're still 1-2. They still have a lot of warts and stuff to work on as the season progresses. And their 2 losses aren't the teams that project to finish super high in the standings. So let's talk about what the Pacers still need to improve upon this season. Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about BetOnline.net, your number 1 source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season this year. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game over at BetOnline. And as always, they remain your continued source for all your sports wagering info with live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there, and more. They've got those Monday Night Football lines up. Patriots, Bears. How do the Bears keep getting these primetime games? Patriots favored by 9 over at BetOnline. You can get all that and so much more if you go check out the website. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. My Phillies are in the World Series. Let's do this. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Pacers-Sixers is tonight, and the Sixers haven't won yet. What is going on in Philly? They lost to the Spurs handily on Saturday night. Keith Pompey will take it through the latest on the Sixers at Locked On Sixers. Go check it out. Let's talk about some stuff the Pacers still need to kind of get a grip on and get some improvement going on if they want to continue to improve, as they did on Saturday. They found their stride in some areas, but still have a ways to go in a couple others. I think my top thing, and this is a thing in the NBA in general, but the top thing is wing play. Whoever you want to classify as wings, even if they may be guards in some lineups, the two guys I'm referring to are Aaron Nesmith and Chris Duarte. Now let's talk about them contextually, because obviously neither of them have made shots. And if you're a box score guy or you just see Chris Duarte miss a layup and think he's having a terrible game, yeah, you probably think they've been awful. Now, they've both played a good defense to me all season. Pretty impressive defense and needed defense, because the Pacers don't have anyone really in the right height range to contain bigger forwards. They haven't had to go against a total stud yet, but Duarte's been guarding, Beal, Keldon Johnson, Cade Cunningham type guys. Nesmith was on Cade Cunningham a little bit, although not always, on Saturday, right? They've been throwing those guys against the best players. I think their defense has been just fine. But Aaron Nesmith, 32% from the field, 27% from deep right now. 3 rebounds, 1 assist per game. Chris Duarte, 26% from the field, 20% from 3. He looked much better and more comfortable on offense on Saturday. Still didn't have the best game. Only 6 points per game from him, 6.3 from Nesmith. As good as those two have been defensively, or as effective as those, I wouldn't say they've been like game-changing, but good defenders. They need more. The Pacers need more from their wings on offense. Desperately. Chris Duarte against the Spurs, 2 for 6, 4 points. Really off. Goes to the bench the next game. Ends with 9 points on 3 of 14, but had some nicer moments on offense and plus 13, game high, because he found the defense in that game. Nesmith started that night, hit the dagger 3 to clutch it out, had 3 blocks, right? Played good defense, 2 for 5 for 7 points for him, right? They both the Pacers need a little bit more from those wings. Mostly, I would say, just at the shooting perspective. But in general, I think on offense, those two guys need to be a little bit better if the Pacers want to win. And speaking of 3-point percentage, that's something the Pacers need in general. It's been off for some guys that are 20th in the league right now in 3-point percentage. I try not to expect things when I look up stats, but I thought that number would be worse when I dug into this. But I guess, with Mathurin shooting really well from deep, Brissett hit half of his in the opener. Nembhard and Haliburton have shot well from deep. Hield is still lighting it up. Those guys take a lot. So it feels like their percentage is worse because all their role guys, basically every single one, are really struggling from deep. Jalen Smith, 16%, 17 if you went around. Goga's at 20%. Duarte and Nesmith, we just talked about. Terry Taylor's taking 2 a game and is only making like 1 and 3 this season. They aren't getting a ton from the role guys from deep, and they're 20th in the league in 3-point percentage, but they're taking the 6th most. And I think they have capable shooters, right? They have 4 guys at 40% or better. Buddy Hield, obviously, a tremendous shooter, not even in that first group. They should probably take a high volume of threes. They wanted to add athleticism and shooting in the offseason, and they did it, but they're not getting quite enough from some of the expected shooters. And I think that's something they need to find better shots for. Jalen Smith had a lot of open corner threes this weekend, right? Like Aaron Nesmith had some good looks this weekend. Duarte's had good looks all year, despite really struggling to put him down. They've got to get a little bit better at the 3-point line. On the defensive side of the ball, they've had struggles everywhere. Connectivity, keeping the ball in front issues. 2 guys I want to single out a little bit. One is the guy I just gassed up a ton for his offensive game. Tyrese Haliburton's defense, still definitely a weak point in his game, right? Something he absolutely has to work on. Trey Jones, who I believe he has some sort of close friendship with, 18 points, cooked right by him, 6 for 12 on Friday. That was not his only matchup, but one of. And then again, the following game, right, Cade Cunningham, 22 points. Jaden Ivey has 17 and 10, right? The guards are just tearing up the Pacers, and the defensive improvement from the big men ended up being able to neuter some of that issue on Saturday. But it still causes defensive rotations. It still forces those guys to have to be better to make up for mistakes on the perimeter, right? I think Haliburton and Hield have to be a little bit better on the defensive end. I think they're some of the culprits of the bigger struggles this team has had on that end of the floor so far. Again, once there's probably 5 games of sample, I'll dig into more of the number side of it. But just watching those 2 guys play, I think they need to be better defensively, right? Hield only playing 15 minutes in their best defensive game of the season, I think, is a little revealing. Although, again, 1 game, small sample size, very early, But those two guys, I think, need to be better on defense. And a couple guys do beyond those two, right? I would not say everybody else has been perfect on that end of the floor, but those are the two in particular that I think you need to see the most growth from for the Pacers. Speaking of guys needing to cover for other guards or being a little out of position or not being on a string, not rotating well, whatever defensive phrase you want to use to describe the Pacers' struggles, they're fouling a lot. This has been a problem for the Pacers for a while. This is sort of a young team problem. Pacers currently fouling the fourth most in the league, 25 times per game the Pacers are fouling. This is something Mathurin's kind of struggled with on the defensive end. He's at 3 per game. Goga's at 3.3 per game. He's been much better reading the game in these first 3 games, but still has a step slow. If he's even a half step too far away from where he needs to be, he's not quick enough to make up for it. Right? They're going to be a high foul team, but containing the ball a little better will bring those numbers down. But it just helps the other team out, getting them a ton of free throws. Pacers currently conceding the second most free throw attempts per game because it's a lot of shooting fouls, but 2, early fouls lead to the bonus, which then the fouls lead to free throws. It's just all been pretty rough for the Pacers, who are giving up 33 free throw attempts per game. Now, that is a little inflated by Haka Jakob Pertl that the Pacers did in their valiant comeback attempt on Friday night. So that's why their fouling is 27th, but their free throw attempts allowed is 29th. That said, though, fouling's still a problem for this team, even beyond the intentional fouls Friday night, something they certainly need to clean up if they would like to be better on defense. And Philly, who they play tonight, will be a tough matchup for a lot of that stuff. They're going to have no answers for Embiid. Turner, even when he does play, cannot contain Embiid at all. Right? They're going to have no answers for him. Right? So they're going to have to defend everybody else pretty well. And Maxi's good. And, they have James Harden. Like, it's going to be a very hard game to keep guys in front and also defend Joel Embiid and also grow on offense. So that's a great test for this team as they try to implement some stuff. I don't think they're going to beat Philly, although didn't think the Spurs would beat Philly. But that's a really tough matchup and a good kind of litmus test for some of these things. Can the Pacers find better three-point shots? Can they defend the perimeter better? Can they stop fouling as much, which against Embiid and Harden is so hard. But we'll learn a lot about what the Pacers have grown on and what they still need to work at as they take on the Sixers tonight in Philly. We'll, of course, break that down tomorrow, talking about what happened in Philadelphia and maybe the biggest storyline from that game, separate from the actual game itself. I think that's how I'm going to cover games this year. And then in the third segment, we'll talk about something else going on with the team this year. Maybe highlight a player, maybe highlight a play, a stat, something as the Pacers trek onto this road trip. We'll, of course, have all the coverage here for you on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. We will see you tomorrow.